Did you remember any of the adjustment going from your little country school to the big high school in town?
Well, I always thought that the other kids thought they were a little better than we country school kids, you know. And that they were a little smarter. But I kind of showed them that country school kids weren't so dumb after all. And they were a little surprised.
Do you remember how community politics affecting the operation of the school at all?
I don't think it had a lot to do with it. But I know that when I was hired to teach this same school that I had attended all those years, that the board president told me that we want to give you a chance and start you out here as a teacher, and being I was one of them that had graduated from that school. So.
Were the parents or the community members involved with the school in any way?
Well, we had a big picnic at the end of the school year, and that was pretty well attended. And the kids played games and stuff. And I remember that there was a community play put on. Oh, Didn't It Rain was the name of it, and my dad was in it. And the community people from the community was in it. And also, church services were held there for a number of years.
Will you tell me the name of that play again that your dad was in?
Oh, Didn't It Rain?
Oh, Didn't It Rain?
Uh-huh.
What did you do once you left school at the end of the day? Did you have chores to do?
Well, I helped a little bit at home, but usually there were so many papers to go over, and you always had to have lesson plans made in advance and get ready for, and of course you had to sweep that building, you know, every day.
Did you ever have any homework?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about your homework.
Papers to correct.
Now, are you talking about when you were a teacher?
Yes.
Okay, as a teacher you had papers to correct.
Yes, papers to correct. And I remember a copy thing that we made. I don't know what it was called, but it had a gelatin base, and you heated that and poured it in this frame. And then you used certain carbon paper, like to make out tests or math problems or anything, and you typed those up or wrote them up with special pen and put that on that gelatin surface, and then you could take off maybe 6 or 8 copies, whatever you needed. So that was the copy machine we had. Pretty crude.
Do you remember as a child any local or national or international events that happened while you were attending rural school?
World War II.
What do you remember?
Well, my good friend was Well, he volunteered. And of course, a lot of the young people from the community and surrounding communities were drafted. And the man I married was gone almost 4 years. So that was pretty traumatic. They didn't talk about it too much, the kids. But it really affected the whole community. Because you were so anxious about all the happenings, you know. And one of our young men was killed.
Were there any disasters in your community itself while you were in country school? Any tornadoes? Influenza?
Well, you know, there was this depression and it was pretty bad. People didn't have much. And we were all in the same boat. And then we had so many dry years and so many dust storms. But our family always had enough to eat. But we were poor.
You talked about the end of the school year picnic. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, all the parents, of course, were invited, and everybody brought food. And we shared, of course.
Okay, we've talked.
But then we just closed up the schoolhouse, locked the doors, you know, and I don't know that I had to turn in any reports anywhere because the county superintendent made several calls during the year to check on the lesson plans and how things were going in school. And I remember she was a pretty good sized lady, but she was always so pleasant, and she always told a story. And you know what story she told? Little Black Sambo. Of course, that was accepted then and sure wouldn't be now, but she was the best storyteller. We just loved her. And she'd have some good ideas to tell me, you know, when I was teaching, or compliment me on what I was doing. She was great.
What was your favorite part of the day?
Oh, I think maybe the opening part of the day with the music and starting the classes, and the kids loved that. We had fun with music.
What's the worst memory you have of country schoolhouse?
Oh, I don't know. I think things went pretty well, and I can't recall things not going so good. probably, going back, I was teaching at Union 4 here in Blackhawk County, and we were playing baseball, and one of the kids really whacked that ball and hit me right here and broke my nose. That's the first time I ever saw stars in the daylight. But it knocked me down. And of course I had a bloody nose. And had to send the kids home and went to the doctor. Not much he could do for a broken nose, you know. And I think that probably was the worst thing.
I would guess so.
Yes.
What lessons from country schools might we benefit from today?
Well, I think people really cared about each other. The students especially, I'm talking about. And they wanted to see success, and they helped each other. Those that would be through with their lesson assignments could help some of the younger ones. And I think the younger ones learned from the older ones.
Could a one-room schoolhouse be successful today?
Well, if it had all the technology that kids are working with today, I don't know why it wouldn't be. But I don't think it would work because there's so much where all these smaller towns have gotten together and closed all their own schools and used a centralized school, and I think it's been done a lot for the sports end of it.
Anything else we should know before we go into the teaching part? Anything else we should know about the students in one-room schoolhouses?
I don't know if I mentioned that the teacher would have to start the fire, you know. She'd have to get in there earlier so that she could warm the place up. And I remember her hauling coal and stuff, and sometimes some of the older kids would go and get some, you know, in a coal pail. But those old buildings were terribly cold and drafty. Nothing was insulated, you know.
Well, how are you doing? Shall we tackle the teacher part today too?
Sure.
All right. I think you're doing wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Where and when did you teach country school?
I taught in the 40s. See, I went to Iowa State Teachers College for a summer, and I could teach. As soon as I got out of high school, I went to what is now UNI, and then I went for the summer and taught in the fall. And I taught for 6 years in different schools. But 4 years in Butler County and 2 years in Blackhawk County.
Were all 4 years in Butler County this Ripley Township number 2?
No.
Okay.
No, I had different schools.
Do you remember what they were?
Yes.
Okay.
I had a school by the name of McCachran, and I'm not sure how to spell it even now or what township it was in, but it was a couple miles from my home. And then I taught at Parkersburg, north of Parkersburg, in a rural school there.
Do you know the name or number of that one?
I don't recall
Okay.
the name of that.
Okay. And was that for the other 2 years then? But you said
I'm trying to think.
you've got 6
I'm
years.
not
altogether.
sure if I was 2 years at McCackron or at Parkersburg.
Okay.
I'm not sure. One of those two.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And then when you said you taught in Blackhawk County,
Yes. Union 4.
what were your room and board arrangements as a teacher?
I stayed with my folks and drove, except for one winter when I was teaching there north of Parkersburg. I stayed with a family that lived right across from the schoolhouse. So that was very convenient. Just had to walk across the road.
Um,
And
did you-
paid some room and
you
board.
paid some room and board,
I don't
okay.
remember how much, but I know I
Okay.
paid some room and board there.
Do you remember what you wore as a teacher?
Dresses and I know I wore dresses or skirts and blouses. Never pants.
Did you still have to wear the long underwear?
No.
Let's go back to the room and board. Would the lady of the house fix your lunch then?
Yes. Yeah. And she fixed breakfast for me and of course evening meal.
Did you have any responsibilities with this family other than paying them? Or-
No.
Okay, so you were free pretty much to do your schoolwork.
Yeah.
Do you remember what time you would have left for school?
Probably about 8 o'clock, I'd say. Because I still had to get a fire going during the cold weather, cool weather.
What would the furthest distance from school have been?
Well, that was probably the furthest from where my parents lived, because that's where I stayed. Probably 5-6 miles, I'd say.
Okay. When you were at Union Number 4 in Blackhawk County,
Yeah.
were you married then
Yes,
and living in this house then?
that house over there.
Or that house over there? Okay.
Yes.
So when you lived right across the school, you would have walked to school.
Yes,
When you went the 5 or 6 miles, you had your own car.
yes, yes.
Okay. Did you ever have any riders with you?
No.
Do you remember anything special about those trips?
I remember daylight savings came on. I think it's the very first time. And I was on this road, it was a familiar road, but it was so dark yet, and I drove right into the ditch. So I walked to a farmhouse, and I knew this couple that lived there. And they were still in bed. And I woke him up and I said, "Ray, I'm in the ditch and I need a pull out." And he got up and got the tractor out and pulled me out of the ditch. And in the meantime, he lost his big lug chain. And it was weeks later that I found it under my feet, that it slid kind of back under there, you know. And I was so embarrassed. But that's the one thing that I remember about driving over there.
Were your schoolhouses, you would have taught in 3 different schoolhouses, any different from the one you attended school in?
No, they were all about
All
the
the
same.
same.
Yes, they were
And
all
the-
about the same.
With the,
I remember McCachran had an organ instead of a piano. And I think the one by Parkersburg didn't have a piano. Then when I was in Parkersburg, we put on a community play, and I'm not sure what the name of that one was. You'd think I'd remember that, wouldn't you? But we put on a community play, and that was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with that.
as the teacher, were you more or less in charge of
Yes,
that play?
yes.
What kinds of things do you do at school after you've got the fire started, before the children arrive?
Well, I tried to keep warm myself, first of all. You know, if there were any other lesson plans or anything I needed to get ready for the day, why, that's what I worked on. And before you know it, the kids started drifting in, and if it was cold, they'd come inside, and if it was nice out, they'd play out of doors, of course, until the bell rang.
And tell me about the bell.
Most of them had the one with the rope, you'd pull.
Is the bell on top of the building?
Mm-hmm. Like the one in the little red schoolhouse over
Okay.
here on First Street.
Okay. About the same, the blackboards and the slates and the books are about the same?
Yes.
Not much difference
Yes,
there?
not much different, not much improvement in any of that during those years.
Were there any supplies that you furnished as the teacher?
Some, but I'd usually get construction paper, which we use for art, and other things that we needed for our art classes.
And you purchased
Yes,
that. And where would you go to get that?
lattice usually.
In Cedar Falls?
Yes, yeah. Well, I would buy them, and they would the board would reimburse me.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. So even when you're clear in Butler County, you'd shop at Lattice in
Yes.
Cedar Falls?
Yes.
What
Chalk, chalk for the chalkboard and erasers and
Okay.
things like that.
What activities began the day once the students were at their seats?
Well, we'd have opening exercises like when I was a student, much like that. We called them opening exercises.
Can you think of anything about how you structured the day's lessons?
Yes, I know how I did it. We had a planning book, and that was given to us by the superintendent. I guess maybe there was a certain budget set aside, and each of the superintendents, or the superintendent anyway, of Butler County, each of the schools would get one of those planning books. And you'd have to fill out each day the things that you were going to do. Whether it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday.
For 9 grades, if you have kindergarten?
Yes, but you didn't always have 9 grades,
Oh, okay.
because some of the grades didn't have any students in.
Can you think of any special things you did as you worked with the children?
I can't think of anything real special because you just did the daily things and tried to get through the different books that were assigned to us. See, there were just certain books we could use. So those were the ones that you had to take your lessons out of.
Did you have a recitation bench?
Yes. Yeah.
What type of work did your students do while they were at their seats?
They would work on the assignments that had been given to them. And if not that, they'd help some of the younger students. Sometimes they were good students. They could go to the board and play a game, go to the blackboard, or get a book from our little teeny library.
Did you get books from the county superintendent?
I don't recall that we got books that we could check out there. No.
How did the day's experiences vary between the grade levels?
Well, I guess it depended what you were working on, whether it was math or whether it was geography. And of course, you didn't teach the little ones geography. You'd maybe touch on this or that, related to it. But as such, no.
How many students were in your school? Schools, do you remember?
Overall, I think probably the most I had was 20 or 20 some.
Do you remember what the smallest number you would have had?
Probably 15.
Did the student population change over time much?
Yeah, it did. It changed. As people would move into the community or move out, or the children graduated and went on to high school. And some of them didn't go on to high school. They stayed home and helped their parents on the farm.
You talked about the science activity where they collected the bark and the leaves for
Yes.
trees. Can you think of any other activities you had your students do?
That one is so shines out in my memory. And I just can't think of something else that we did. I'm sure we did, but it's been a long time ago.
What did you like? What did you enjoy teaching the most?
Probably history and
Because
geography, I think, is so neat.
So you'd say the subjects you enjoy are the ones you enjoy teaching the most.
Yes, yeah.
Were there any subjects you didn't enjoy teaching?
Science probably was the hardest. It should have been the easiest because it was right there.
Do you know why you didn't like it?
I don't know, because it was so kind of iffy. Weren't some real goals set up for it.
Did you ever have any helpers as a teacher?
No, I didn't, except my sister helped with some sweeping, I can remember. And I have two sisters, and they both were teachers too.
In rural schools?
And my youngest sister taught at the college level even, so she went up there.
Did your rules differ very much from as the ones you had as a student?
No, not a lot.
What techniques discipline techniques did you use to enforce your rules?
No. I didn't like for the children to be whispering and disturbing others when they were trying to work. And they had to hold up their hands to get some help. And I think one finger to go to the outhouse. And I didn't like to be disturbed when I was having class. Probably should mention that usually had a book that I read a chapter out of every day, and the kids liked that. Always encourage reading, I think. Reading is so important, but you have to know how.
And did your students always bring their lunches?
Yes. Yes, they did.
Their lunchtime was a half hour too?
Yes.
Did your lunch change much from a student to a teacher?
Not a lot. Oh.
And what did your students do at recess time?
Well, they played games and they played baseball. And if they were inside, they would play musical chairs. And they'd get a time of deciding which game they wanted to play too.
How was that decided?
Or would ask the kids what they thought they'd like to do, and one or two would make a suggestion, and they'd go along with it, you know.
Did you see your students outside of the school day?
Probably the only place I'd see them would be at church.
Did your students help you keep the classroom up?
Well, they were supposed to keep their desks neat and paper picked up off the floor. And that was one thing we did before we were dismissed. Pick all the paper up off the floor, scraps and stuff. Might have fallen on the floor.
Do you have your eraser crew
And
too?
the eraser crew.
Do you have any help taking care of the schoolhouse?
No. And the one thing that was always kind of a problem was water.
Tell me about that.
Well, in Ripley too, we had our own well, and they all did, but this one pumped so hard. It was just awful. It almost took two people. But we'd get a pail of water in, and there was a dipper in it, you know, and I don't remember if we had cups or whether everybody drank out of the dipper. I think they did when I went to school. But, you know, for each one to have a cup and keep track of it, because they didn't have paper cups in those days, so there wasn't any thrown away. So if one had a cold, they'd all get it, you know.
Do you know of any of these three schools why the location was selected for the country school?
Well, I don't. I think it was set up by the state that every 2 miles would be a schoolhouse.
How would you say your school compared with the other schools at the time?
I'd say they were about all alike, except Union 4 and the one at Parkersburg. They had a furnace in the basement.
Do you remember anything about community politics? influencing the operation of your schools?
Not really.
Any involvement with the parents or community in your school?
The only way through, if kids got in trouble, you'd call the parents, but I don't even recall very much of that. One of the parents told me if James gets in trouble in school, he's gonna get in trouble at home. You know, so most parents were real supportive.
Tell me about the role of the county superintendent.
Oh, she was a sweetheart. She was a big woman and always wore lipstick and would come and visit a couple times a year and look over your plans in the schoolhouse and the schoolyard and what you were doing. And like I said, she told this story about Black Sambo that I won't ever forget. Oh, she could tell stories, but that one is especially, remember that.
Do you remember what you got paid?
Yes. I got paid $50 a month.
The whole 6 years you taught?
It got a little more to the end.
Each
I
year
think,
a little more?
Yes. I think in the end I was getting 75. But you know, that was a lot of money in those days.
Okay.
I could buy my own toothpaste. You know?